Once upon a time, there were two little princesses, whose names were Violetta and Gambetta, and they lived in Mountainy Castle. They were twins, and they were so much like each other that when Violetta came in from a walk with her wet feet, Gambetta was sometimes told to go and change her stockings, because the queen couldn't tell which from the other. But that didn't often happen, because if Princess Violetta was out for a walk, Princess Gambetta was almost sure to be out with her. Indeed, they were so fond of one another that you might have thought they were tied together with a piece of string. All the same, the queen used to be so fussed and worried by the confusion that with one thing and another she persuaded the king to appoint a special lord to distinguish between them. And he was called the Lord High Teller of the Other from Which. The first thing he did after he was given this office was to decree that everyone should call them by shorter names, because, as he said, their names both ended with Etta, and that made it much harder to tell. Hi everybody, welcome back to the library, welcome back to the Inkling review. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit like and subscribe, because we have new material coming out to you every Sunday here on the channel, so please join us every week. But this week, of course, here on the Inkling review, we are revisiting Owen Barfield, and this month we are looking at his novel, The Silver Trumpet. The Silver Trumpet first came out in 1925, so this is actually a really important book in the history of the Inklings, because Barfield, like Tolkien, like Lewis, and to some extent like Williams, all had very academic intellects, but they all had the heart of a poet, and they wanted to tell stories. And this is the first fantasy published by the Inklings. Now, the Inklings group officially or unofficially really doesn't start for a little while longer, but Barfield and Lewis had already been friends by this point. In fact, they knew each other in their school years. But this book, as you can see from that opening line, is just as playful with language as Tolkien is in The Hobbit or Lewis is in the Narnia books. So this book really proves to them, it's kind of a proof of concept to both Tolkien and Lewis later on, that these type of books can be have an audience, that people want to read them, but more importantly, can be good. And so this is this wonderful book with great illustrations. If you can get a copy, by the way, there's some wonderful illustrations throughout the novel, as you can see. But this is the book that we're going to be talking about today, Owen Barfield's The Silver Trumpet. So, what is The Silver Trumpet about? Well, The Silver Trumpet, as the opening paragraph makes clear, is about two sisters, Violetta and Gambetta, or Violet and Gamboy, as they're called for most of the novel. But these two twins were given a blessing or a curse, that they looked exactly the same, that they would love each other more than anyone else, and as long as one was living, both shall be, which is very cryptic and doesn't really become understandable until the end of the novel. But like in this ever-diverse pair that we talked about the last time we talked about Barfield, polarity is a really big idea for Barfield, and even at this early stage in his writing career, comes out here in this work of fiction. Even though Violet and Gamboy both look the exact same, they slowly become mirror images of each other. Violet wears her hair down and dresses in white. Gamboy wears black and keeps her hair pulled back tightly. Violet is exuberant and friendly, and Gamboy is quiet and cold and kind of standoffish. And it's not good and evil. As long as the two can exist in harmony, then one is neither good nor evil. But if one takes greater hold, then problems can ensue, and they do in this book. Because as they grow older, one day a man named a prince named Prince Courtesy arrives at the Castle Mountain, and he first meets Gambetta and is completely kind of tossed aside by her, dismissed. She's very dismissive of him. But then he meets Violet, and she is incredibly friendly and welcoming, and then he realizes there's two of them. And he slowly, well, not so slowly, it's a fairy tale, but he falls in love with Princess Violet, and eventually the two marry. And as that relationship develops, the harmony between the two poles of Violet and Gamboy begins to become unbalanced. And Gamboy starts to use her, what some would say, worldly wisdom, but really is uber rationalization and cynicism. And she starts to use that to manipulate those around her and to gain more power for herself, regardless of the cost to others. And Courtesy and Violet have a child named Lily, but Violet is left very weak from the pregnancy, and it's all kept very hush-hush. But Gamboy manipulates the court jester into thinking he's going to cheer the princess up, or Queen Violet at this point, up, and instead scares her to literal death. And over the years, Gamboy starts to manipulate both the king, the new Princess Lily, and those around her to slowly give herself more and more control and power. First, she just becomes an important advisor to the king because he's so withdrawn from having lost his wife, and Gamboy manipulates this kind of the isolation of Lily from her father too, so that she eventually starts to call herself Queen Gamboy. But her plans go awry because a new prince shows up who has fallen in love with just a picture of Princess Lily. And the shenanigans that ensue are very fairy tale-esque. I won't give them all away. You should get this book and read it for yourself. But eventually, Prince Pirio is able to save the day. And he saves the day with an instrument brought first to the kingdom by Prince Courtesy, a silver trumpet. Now, when Courtesy comes into the scene, the silver trumpet is shown to have magic powers of creating harmony. Very briefly, but it is lost. And the rediscovery of it, though, becomes critical in returning harmony at the end of the book as well. And it is tough to describe the end, but I know the first time I read the book, I was like, wait, I have to read this again. But the prince returns the trumpet to the king, and it is blown clarion call after clarion call. And what happens through those blasts is Queen Gamboy, her features start to soften, and suddenly before them is Queen Violet. And very fairy tale-esque, all happiness is restored. So, this very playful language, but also dark, much again like The Hobbit, like Narnia. You see both of these things throughout the book, and it comes to this wonderful ending. So what are the strengths of the book? Well, as is pretty common between Tolkien and Lewis and Barfield and Williams, there's a certain command of language. In this case, much like The Hobbit and much like the Narnia books, there is a playfulness of language that comes with that command. So as you read through these things, these complicated ideas that Barfield has, like polarity and some other smaller ones that are throughout, he's able to illustrate them in a way that you don't always realize he's trying to explain a concept. So it's in that way he's teaching you, but you're not, and you're learning, but you don't necessarily realize that you're in Mr. Barfield's classroom. And so that's a really wonderful skill to have when you're writing, particularly something in a more, kind of fairy tale vibe. So what are the weaknesses? Well, Barfield has complicated ideas, and while some of his ideas, much like what happened at the end of this ever diverse pair, while some of the ideas are a little bit complicated and you have to go, wait, I need to read that again because I'm not really sure what he was trying to tell me. Some of that is smoothed out by the fact he's writing for children, and so it's not nearly as big an issue in this book. But it does happen in a couple places. But really all that means is just read the page again. It's such a joyful story that it's not really a big deal. And again, even with that, still a wonderful book that you can read to your children. Tolkien famously told Lewis, and then Lewis reported back to Barfield, that the book was wildly popular in the Tolkien household. So, and again, with the pictures that are in there, it's still a great book that you can read with your kids. So how do I rank the book? I'm giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's a really solid book. I don't think it's quite as detailed as you get with The Hobbit or even the Narnia books to some extent. And the ideas that Barfield's trying to communicate in some places aren't as simple as what Narnia. And of course, Tolkien's always the most subtle about what he's trying to communicate, so that's not even an issue in The Hobbit. But it is a little bit of an issue here in the Silver Trumpet. But I think this is a book that, one, I think should get some new editions and should really go out there for people to read. Because if you like the Inklings, I think this book is really important to have if you're reading the fantastical works of the group. So what's coming up next month on the Inkling Review? Well, we're going to be returning to C.S. Lewis next month, and we're going to be looking at one of his classic works of Christian apologetic literature, and that is the novel The Screwtape Letters. So make sure you like and subscribe here on the channel so you don't miss that video or any video, because we have videos every Sunday here on the channel. So please join us next week and join us next month for the next Inkling Review. And y'all have a great day, and I'll see you next week.